Hello. Um, Good afternoon, everyone. May we please request everyone to take your seats. We will start in 10 minutes. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon to our speakers and distinguished guests from the government, the private sector, civil society, the academe, and the media. All right, good afternoon again to everyone who's here today in our venue. I am Joyce Ilas. I am the Communications and Advocacy Lead of Strat-based ADR Institute, and I will be your host for today. Welcome to the Forum on Philippine Water Management Agenda, Ensuring Sustainability and Security. Now, this event is organized by the Strat-based ADR Institute in partnership with the Philippine Business for Environmental Stewardship, or PBEST. Now, this is a hybrid event, so thank you very much to everyone who's here with us right now in the venue, and also thank you to everyone who are monitoring us live via Zoom and Facebook Live. So this event gathered today key stakeholders from diverse sectors to discuss the national government's water management agenda and the private sector's initiatives to positively contribute to achieving a water-secure Philippines. It also aims to contribute to the growing discussions regarding sustainability and to present feasible solutions to water scarcity and security in the country, now and moving forward. So to open today's event, please welcome Professor Victor Andres Dindo Manhit, President of Strat-based ADR Institute.
Good morning. Good afternoon to everyone. I would like to welcome everyone to this hybrid webinar, the Philippine Water Management Agenda, Ensuring Sustainability and Security. My colleague Joyce told or spoke of our online participants. As of this afternoon, I think 357 of them. So hopefully technology allows them to listen to our discussion the whole afternoon. In Strat-based, we have always been proud of how we try to track what we call political and economic risks, as it even relates not only local, but even at the geopolitical level. And this afternoon, we want to focus on what we consider, what we call the climate crisis. And of course, as we look at this policy, political, economic risk, we normally, based on our analysis on data that we try to track from partners, either Social Weather Station or Pulse Asia. Last week, we shared our data on West Philippine Sea issue. Now, it reminded me of a data that we shared early this year from Social Weather Station in their December survey, where 93% of Filipinos experienced the impact of climate change. And we have seen it grow through time. And this climate threat that is being felt, being experienced by at least 93% of our people, will always be a risk given the scarcity of clean water resource. Climate change and global warming have exacerbated the occurrence of droughts, putting pressure on water resources, security, and sustainability. One of the most significant and looming manifestations of climate change that concerns us as a nation, us as an institute, is the El Nino. This weather pattern threatens to bring extended dry periods, exacerbating the strain on our water resources. With the imminent arrival of various parts of our nation becomes more pronounced. And how do we address this water resource threat? We believe on the need for effective and coherent water resource management plan. Water utilization encompasses a broader spectrum as it affects every sectors of society. There's a need to ensure stakeholders' access to clean water and sanitation, especially in urbanized areas, as it is not only compromises public health, but also increases the likelihood of emerging diseases. Moreover, reliable water infrastructure is needed to ensure unhampered economic and industrial activities and services to Filipino communities. A few months back, we took note of an executive order from President Bongbong Marcos Jr. That enabled the creation of the Water Resource Management Office, which aims to harmonize government efforts and regulatory bodies to ensure the availability and sustainability of Philippines' water resource through the implementation of the integrated water resource management in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDG. It would be debilitating, according to our president, to the entire economy, to the entire society if our water supply problem continues to get greater, continues to become more dependent on what we have been doing in the past. We believe in the Institute that we need to advance strategic water resource management by fostering cooperative endeavors between the public, the private sector, and within the private sector, not only the corporate, but also civil society and citizens group. Achieving a water-secure Philippines requires the support and participation of all stakeholders, not only in the Metro Manila area, but at the national level in different local areas. Industry players equally make a valuable contribution through their investments and programs that enhance water access and quality, particularly in urban areas. Private sector initiatives are crucial in realizing our shared vision of water-secure Philippines. We have always argued in our institute, we've been around since 2004, we don't need the whole of government. What we need is the whole of society. It takes society to address these challenges. And today, we're happy to bring people together, and I'm happy to introduce our keynote speaker, Secretary of the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, Secretary Maria Antonia Tony Yulo Loizaga. Ma'am.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the organizers. They provided me this very convenient podium. Otherwise, this is all you would see of me. So, good afternoon, and thank you very much to Professor Manhit for that kind introduction. Welcome to the Water Summit, co-organized by our friends from the Strat-Based Institute today. We come together as a community, united by a shared responsibility to protect our water resources, and in turn provide ample water supply to sustain our communities, grow our food, and support our industries. This summit cannot come at a more appropriate time as we confront a dwindling supply from Angat and an impending dry spell brought about by the El Niño condition this year, and possibly, of course, next year. Central to our efforts for better water governance is the recognition that water is intrinsically linked to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, from eradicating poverty and hunger to ensuring health and well-being through clean water and sanitation for all, to protecting life on land and below water, to climate action. Water underpins the achievement of all of these goals. To this, we should add, and in connection with the graphic that was shown by Professor Manhit earlier, water is related to migration. Where resources are not available, people will move. it is also connected with forced displacement, where disasters actually happen that are water-related, people will need to move. The achievement of all of these goals by addressing water-related challenges comprehensively will require us to unlock the potential for transformative change across all sectors of society, and this should include the most vulnerable. The solution to our problems, starting with fixing the disconnected and fragmented management of water by more than a dozen agencies of government, can actually happen. In May, the President created the Water Resources Management Office, or the WRMO, by virtue of 22. It is a significant first step, as it is the first time in our country's history that a majority of water agencies are now under one roof. With MWSS, LUA, and the 500 or so water districts now attached to the DNR, they join the LLDA, the NWRB, and several DNR offices that are responsible for water quality, flood monitoring, groundwater mapping, watershed protection, water quality management, and so on. Several agencies have also been directed to directly work with the WRMO, including, and this is ongoing, the DPWH for infrastructure projects, NEDA for the economic valuation of water, and NIA for the irrigation that we need in our agriculture sector. Last month, the President also signed Memorandum Circular 22, directing the WRMO to launch a nationwide program for water conservation. We started with plugging the leaks of government facilities with the highest water consumption. This was followed by issuing bulletins to building administrators and chief executives at the local government level on water conservation strategies. Through the DNR, we have also taken several steps. The first of which is a new office at the DNR under an undersecretary for Integrated Environmental Science. This is a new office, and it's in contrast to the other plantilla positions, which are actually headed by lawyers. So the regulatory function of the DNR has in fact been strengthened over the years. It is now time to strengthen the science function of the DNR. Secondly, we have created a geospatial office. We continue to map, monitor, and quantify our country's water resources. Today, we are able to identify rivers that potentially can supply multiple LGUs, while at the same time providing irrigation water to rural farms, produce hydropower, and serve as flood control infrastructure as well. Such integrated projects enhance water availability and reduce vulnerability despite the uncertainties brought about by climate change. They also will allow a single investment to generate multiple positive values across different sectors. One of the bureaus under the DNR is that of the Forest Management Bureau. It is FMB that is in charge of watershed protection and enhancement through the patrolling and reforestation efforts of our different deputized agents. Maintaining our watersheds play a significant role in ensuring that a robust quantity and appropriate quality of water is available for our use. For these efforts, we have also now partnered with the private sector and will continue to do so as we recognize that the government cannot do this alone. Everyone's contribution is required and deeply appreciated. In January 2023, we completed the IRR for the Extended Producer's Responsibility, or EPR law. This is a landmark law that aims to recover plastic waste before it reaches our waterways. This should have significant impacts in improving the quality of water in our rivers and pave the way towards reclaiming these water resources, like the Pasig River, as natural assets and not as liabilities. In summary, in this summit, we hope to affirm our commitment to universal access to clean water, recognize the urgency of addressing pollution and climate change, and embrace the transformative potential of innovation and partnerships. The journey towards water security may be daunting, but our collective resolve and shared responsibility will guide us towards success. Thank you very much for your unwavering dedication to water for all. And let us continue our work with focus, passion, urgency, and unwavering commitment. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you very much, Secretary Maria Antonia Tony Yulo Loizaga. All right, our next speaker will talk about Executive Order number 22, which created the Water Resource Management Office. He is Honorable Carlos Primo C.P. David, the Undersecretary for Integrated Environmental Science. He is a licensed geologist and also a former professor at the National Institute of Geological Sciences at the University of the Philippines, Diliman. Ladies and gentlemen, Yusek C.P. David.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. With the permission of our secretary, I wanted to provide a little more detail on what she mentioned about what we have been doing the last 3 months since the creation of the Water Resources Management Office. So this is something like parang a thesis defense, no? 3 months into the work, what have we been doing? What have we done so far? And I should mention that many of you are partners in this endeavor. Teka, kinakabahan ako kasi parang all the stakeholders and the experts are in the room, no? But thanks to, it's really a concerted effort among the agencies that are now attached to the DNR, which includes MWSS, represented by Ma'am Bobby here, LUA, the water districts, no, NWRB, NEDA, no, and everyone is actually pitching into these efforts that you will see now. Next slide, please. So this is Executive Order number 22, and next slide. With this executive order, the three agencies, MWSS, LUA, and the water districts, as mentioned by Sec Tony, are now within the DNR family. Next slide. They join all these other agencies with water-related functions, and therefore, the issues of coordination, no, among the agencies are a little bit better, no, these days. Of course, next slide please, there are still many other agencies that have water functions, and I don't think that they would have to be under the DNR roof as well, because they do have other functions that are related to other agencies such as NIA with the Department of Agriculture, Bureau of Soils and Water Management, DPWH water supply projects, and I'll speak to you more about that, DOH in terms of drinking water quality standards, DOE on hydropower, MMDA, DILG, and National Power Corporation, which owns many of our dams. However, together with EO22, the President directed all of them to coordinate, you know, with the DNR. Next slide. 1 month after the creation of the WRMO, Memorandum Circular number 22 was issued, and this is primarily to combat the impact of El Nino that we are experiencing today. So far, we have issued 2 bulletins. The first one is geared towards building managers of government facilities. And then the second one is really geared towards LGU leaders, no, barangay captains, mayors, subdivision managers and so on. What have we been doing? Well, we are working with the top 4 water users, in Metro Manila, and these top 4 users have, on average, a bill of, I would say, 12 million pesos per month, per facility. And I've been working with the teams from Manila Water and Maynilad also here with us today, to start plugging some of the leaks that are actually not anymore the responsibility of the concessionaires, because these are leaks after the meter, and therefore it's the responsibility really of these facilities, but they do not have those capabilities. And therefore I brought the team of Annette of Maynilad and Jock of Manila Water. So far, I'm glad to report to you that one of the facilities have reduced their water consumption by 500,000 liters each day, just by plugging a couple of leaks. And the work is not done so far. Since last week, we have been inspecting the top 100 water users as well. Some are hospitals. One is a prison facility, and we've been going through to each and every facility to see, why the bill is so high. So it's two-pronged. Number one, to decrease their utility cost, and number two, to save precious water, because we need every drop of water this year because of El Nino. And finally, for this week, we will be disseminating water use reports per LGU, so that the executive officer of each LGU can direct those individual facilities that are actually using too much water. Next slide, please. In the office, we have been working with the Geospatial Database Office of the DNR, and we want to map out and quantify our resources. Sabi nga ni Sec Tony, we measure what we treasure, and in the DNR, definitely one of the resources that we treasure is water. Next slide, please. So let me show you some of the work that we have been doing. We have now completed the mapping of all the rivers, creeks, and streams of the entire country. For each and every segment or tributary of the rivers in the Philippines, we now have a computation of the volume of water per segment, anywhere in the country. Next slide. We use this information and map this together with the users of water. Next slide, please. So what you're seeing here is the same map with all the rivers that's quantified, plus each and every pin there, which is a licensed or a, what do you call this? Well, they own a water right, to extract water from all those points over there. When you overlay the points over the rivers that you have quantified, what you now have is the information of how much water is left, because you have the total volume minus those that have been extracted from each and every point, and therefore you will have what is left. Next slide. This map shows you a different way of looking at population in the Philippines. This is area-based, AI-generated population map of the Philippines. And the brighter the colors are, the more people there are. This is a combination of census data together with street lighting during nighttime, satellite imagery. And what you're seeing here in this part of Luzon, which is adjacent to Lingayen Gulf, are the many municipalities that are constantly growing in size. And what that means in terms of water supply is that these are the areas that are now ripe for bulk water supply. They shouldn't be using groundwater anymore on a per municipality basis, because the clustering has already reached an amount of, or a number of people wherein bulk water supply is now viable. No? When we do bulk water supply, we are now going to tap surface water sources, which is more sustainable compared to using groundwater. This is in Luzon. Next slide. Just showing you part of Visayas. No? If you know your geography, that's Iloilo over there, Bacolod, and Cebu and Mactan on the lower right-hand side. Now, what we do in our office is to project in 10, 15 years, what would be the population distribution? Next slide, please. This would be something like 15 years from now, where the population will spread. And now you can see the clustering of municipalities north of Iloilo, the population growth towards the south of Bacolod, and for Cebu, maybe we can go back one slide so we can see the current. Go back one slide, please. Current situation, and then after. No, so next slide, please. Right there. No, so you see where the population is growing, and these are the areas that will have water scarcity, and therefore development of water sources will be critical. Next slide. This is in Mindanao, and so you can see that band of towns and cities that are now forming. No, that's Cotabato City over there, Gensan, and Davao City on the right side. And then you have all these towns in the middle. And all these would have demand for water, no, in the near future. Next slide. We are working very closely with the DPWH, no, through Sec Manny Bonoan. Turns out that we have a lot of money for water. For water supply alone, just for this year, we have 14 billion pesos of water supply projects. And all those areas lighted yellow or light yellow, each would be a water supply project, roughly around 10 to 15 million pesos each. Now, we wanted to work with them to ensure that they actually become water projects, no? Because some of these areas do not have a source, and therefore, that 10 million pesos will actually be going to waste if there is actually no source to be found. Next slide. An even bigger budget, and I wanted to direct your attention to the amount of money that we are spending. This is on a yearly basis. This is for 2023, 276 billion pesos for flood control. And when we say flood control projects under the DPWH, these would mostly be dikes along rivers. And so we were talking to NIA and DPWH, perhaps we can repurpose some of these projects so that it's no longer just dikes, but actually impoundments, small height dams, and reservoirs for water supply of communities or even for irrigation, definitely hydropower and flood control purposes. I wanted to show you some of the potential areas. Okay, next slide. This is San Cristobal River in Calamba, Laguna, budgeted for this year, 744 million pesos. No, just think how much we can do if this were to become a water supply project. What you're seeing there in the picture is San Cristobal River, and so you can see the right side, they've already built the dikes, and so for this year, they will build the dikes on the other side. Next slide. It turns out, just upstream of San Cristobal, is this old dam that used to be operated for irrigation. But it's no longer functioning because there are no more farms in that area. They've been converted into houses. What if some of that money, some of the 744 million, will be put into rehabilitating this area, perhaps increase the height of the dam, put more cascading dams afterwards, and become a water supply for the towns nearby. Next slide. Here's another area. This is Imus River. 348 million budgeted for this year for dikes again. You can see the river over here. This one over here. Okay. And for Imus, there's a small patch of agricultural land that's left no, on the right side of the river. Soon it will also be converted into housing. Next slide. So is it far-fetched to think of an impoundment no, right in the middle of Imus to serve as water supply for all the communities around it? Is that feasible? Perhaps. Next slide. And finally, one more example. This is a Pagsanhan River in Lumban, in Laguna. Here's a picture of Pagsanhan River. That's a town over there. Maybe we can do a different project. Next slide, please. If that area becomes an impoundment of water to serve as irrigation water supply, or even, no better yet, potable water for that community over there, then the value of the 353 million investment we will make anyway will actually go much further. The area that I'm talking about, that area, next slide please, is right there, no? And if you can imagine that becoming a man-made lake with a treatment facility on one side, then this becomes a potable water supply, securing the water for that town, no, which is Lumban. Next slide. And so that I think those are just some of the projects that we would want to study more, no, and proceed with the DPWH in the near future. But this can only happen with concerted effort, no, between the different agencies and coordination with DPWH, NIA, and everyone else. And this is the very essence of forming the Water Resources Management Office. I'm sure we'll hear more ideas on how to solve the water problems of the country, no, later on with our speakers. But I'll leave you with those, no, dream projects, no, new ideas that we may be able to do very, very soon. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you. That's loud. Thank you very much, USEC CP David. So I'm sure many of you have questions that you want to ask to our USEC CP and to our other guests later. So at this point, we will now proceed to our panel discussion and also open forum. All right, but before that, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Israeli ambassador to the Philippines, His Excellency Ilan Fluss. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir. All right. And as we proceed to our panel discussion and open forum, we would like to remind everyone, to our attendees here in the venue, should you have questions that you want to ask our panelists, we have provided sheets of paper on your table. You may write your questions on those paper and then hand them over to our organizers. We'll try our best to address your questions later. And to everyone who's with us via Zoom, you may also write your questions in the Q&A box in the lower parts of your screen. All right, so I think we are now ready to proceed to our panel discussion and open forum. And allow me to introduce our panelists. So starting with the Undersecretary for Integrated Environmental Science, let's welcome back on stage USEC CP David. And our next panelist is the current administrator of the Metropolitan Waterworks and Sewerage System, or MWSS. Prior to her appointment, she also served as the MWSS Deputy Administrator for Engineering. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Leonor Cleofas. Also with us today is Mr. Jose Victor Emmanuel Jocot de Dios. He is the President and CEO of Manila Water. He concurrently sits on the boards of Oriental Petroleum and Minerals Corporation and Phoenix Petroleum Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jose Victor Emmanuel Jocot de Dios. Also joining today's panel is Mr. Ramon Fernandez. He is the President and Chief Executive Officer of Maynilad Water Services. Prior to his appointment, he was also the President and CEO of Metro Pacific Tollways Corporation, Tollways Management Corporation, and MPCA LA Holdings. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ramon Fernandez. Okay, our next panelist is Ms. Ana Victoria Lu. She is the president of Apo Agua Infrastructura and the first vice president for water business of Aboitiz Infra Capital. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Ana Victoria Lu. And also with us today is Mr. Juan Eugenio Rojas. He is the president and CEO of Philinvest Development Corporation Utilities Incorporated. And prior to joining the Philinvest Group, he was the vice president for external affairs of Vivant Corporation and also vice president for external affairs and director of 1590 Energy Corporation. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Juan Eugenio Rojas. Okay, also joining us today, joining today's panel is Dr. Philomer Torrio. He is an associate program director at City University of Seattle, Canada, and also a senior research fellow for the Ateneo School of Government. Ladies and gentlemen, he will be joining us virtually because he's currently outside the country, Dr. Philomer Torrio. And our last, but definitely not the least panelist, we have attorney Christopher Kit Belmonte. He is currently a co-convener of Citizen Watch Philippines. He formerly served as a congressman of the 6th District of Quezon City and also served as a consultant for the Office of the Presidential Advisor on Political Affairs under the Office of the President. Ladies and gentlemen, attorney Kit Belmonte. Yes, quite a packed panel we have today. And to moderate today's panel discussion, we have attorney Karen Jimeno. She is the director and chief legal counsel of Softcap Partners, and she is also the host of The Way Forward, a new show of CNN Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, attorney Karen Jimeno.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And you're right, we have a packed panel today, so we'll be mindful with the time, but we'll also try to cover a lot in this panel. So we'll start a question that I suppose applies to everyone. And this is really something that faces us today. There's a shortage of water, which is why our president has recognized that there's a water crisis. But we're also facing some issues on environmental degradation. So in your opinion, how do you think we can strike a balance between ensuring clean and equitable access to water for all Filipinos, but also balancing that with environmental preservation and resilience? So I'm seeing our administrator, Ms. Leonor, already grabbing the mic. Perhaps this is something that you can, yes, start with.
This is the fault of USEC City. Actually, good afternoon, everybody, and to Secretary Tony, good afternoon, ma'am, and to our ambassador, to everybody, good afternoon. Really, this is a very timely forum for us to be able to ventilate what we are doing at MWSS. You talk about balancing the ecosystem and the sustainable water supply. On the part of MWSS, for the information of everybody, we have 3 concessionaires that is helping the government, the MWSS, in making sure that we deliver the mandate of MWSS. And we are now on the 26 years of cooperation between Manila Water and also Maynilad. But the 3rd concessionaire is the Bulacan Bulk. The company is called Luzon Clean Water. We are giving treated bulk water to the 22 water districts. And this is very timely on the presentation of USEC-CP that the best way for us to have sustainable for other areas outside the MWSS service area is the provision of treated bulk water to our water districts. But going back to Metro Manila, the service area of MWSS is not only the Mega Manila, but we also service the whole province of Rizal and also a portion of Cavite. For us, MWSS, we know for a fact that we have to have a water security. And we believe that infrastructure is the key to water security, but also taking care of the environment, the watershed, where we get our raw water. And this is the main goal of MWSS together with our private concessionaires. So we are taking care of the 7 watershed that we get our water source. But for us to be able to have a water security, there are 3 pillars that we are working on. For the Umiray Angat Ipo Lameso conveyance system, we are re-engineering our raw water conveyance. For everybody's information, these raw water conveyance were built sometime in 1930s. So we have to make sure that we replace the old raw water conveyance system. The second is the short to medium water sources. We know for a fact that long-term water source is a really takes a longer period for us to be able to accomplish. So the Board of Trustees has approved our 2 concessionaires to build short to medium water sources. This is the gap before we can deliver the long-term water source. And the third is the long-term water source wherein we are building the Kaliwa Dam. For the information of everybody, this is called before as Liban Dam during the term of the President Ferdinand Marcos, but was shelved for a while. And what we did at MWSS is redesign because in 1980s, this is the determined long water source that will duplicate our Angat. So this is the Kaliwa, Kanan, Agos River Basin. The Angat Dam supplies about 90% of our water for the whole Metro Manila, Cavite, Rizal, and Bulacan, and we are servicing about 20 million population. So we have to make sure that while waiting for the long term, MWSS is doing the share for us to have the short-term water source. So I'd like to also thank our partners for being active, making sure that even with the impact or the intended impact of the El Nino later this year or early this year, or next year, should I say, we are ready. Of course, for the information of everybody, we have the rain dance last Monday with our indigenous people. We are doing not only science-based solution, but also making sure that we also believe on the mga ninuno and anitos of our indigenous peoples, brother. So we have the rain dance last Monday, and you can see last Monday, it was very, very hot. But after a few days, we have that. So we are thankful that we have these rains. And for the information also, Angat has recent increased by 2 meters. Our Ipo is almost full. So and also our Lamesa Dam has increased the elevation, and we make sure that we bring down the water to the Lamesa portal. So you can see in the news that Maynila has suspended the water interruption. But finally, we are taking care of our watershed. Part of our mandate is to protect the environment. It's not only getting the water, but also making sure that we have sustainable supply of raw water. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Leonor. Well, I think everyone here was saying that the water dance worked too well, a little too well, because there was some flooding in areas of Metro Manila. Would we have any other answers from our panel members?
I have the mic, I guess.
Yes, yes, Mr.
Go
President.
for a couple of minutes. I'll go a little bit, 20,000 feet, and talk broad strokes. I think, from my experience in the sector so far and other sectors, I think there needs to be a deeper sense of introspection. In 2001, the country reorganized the power sector. And from then on, we've seen, for better or for worse, that the sector has evolved. Nothing has really happened in the water sector. And I remember studying subjects in law where you couldn't really figure out who was the whip for the water sector. I'm sure you would appreciate that as well. I guess what's important, and listening to the Undersecretary earlier about really intuitive, very insightful ways to handle or tackle these issues is very eye-opening. And amongst the different stakeholders, and we've been talking a lot with the DENR, with Secretary Tony, on a lot of very good ideas. Really, it's in the execution and really putting together collective heads from different agencies, not just within the scattered agencies of the water sector, but as well other agencies, because you have the Department of Health that's involved, obviously the Department of Agriculture that's involved, DPWH, and as mentioned as well, the Department of Energy. So I guess it's really a political will. The fact that our President had mentioned in his first State of the Nation address that water is an important component of national development is already a very significant step. And the fact that WRMO has been created really just reinforces that. But I think a deeper sense of introspection, so that beyond this, event or this conference, we go out saying this is what we're going to do in a very concerted manner. We in Metro Manila, raise our voices whenever there's a impending shortage brought about by climate change, i.e. El Nino, which happens every 4 years. But every year we have conversations with the MWSS about the levels of Angat and how these are changing. What more the rest of the country? There is a NEDA master plan that puts access of the society to potable system-wide water at maybe about mid 50%. So it's not just Metro Manila, but it's the entire country. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Anything to add, Mr.
Yeah,
Ferdinand?
just to add to what was said already by MWSS and Manila Water, we at Manila support the urgent call of the President on water. And we also support the creation of the office that will integrate and coordinate the water policies of the different 30 agencies of government. Ang wish namin talaga, which already was mentioned earlier, the answer, CP, to your example of using our rivers as sources of raw water is yes. In fact, in Imus today, we have 2 modular treatment plants sourcing water and treating water coming from Anabu River and Julian River. Susunod po namin yung Imus. Pangalawa po, meron po rin kami 2 projects sa Bacoor that will source water from Molino River, and again, delivering water to our customers in Cavite. It's a good solution, tapping new small sources that are near our customers. And to add to that, we're building our 3rd plant in Laguna Lake, 150 MLD, which we will commission 50 MLD before the year end, and another 100 MLD by March of next year. This is what Maynilad is doing, and as the administrator was saying, ito po yung projects ng 2 concessioners, short at saka medium term lang. But what we are supporting really is the long-term project, which is the Kaliwa project, Kaliwa Dam project, which is, by the way, a project of Marcos Sr. and being implemented by the son. And we support the acceleration of the project because what Metro Manila needs is really a long-term solution. The other thing that we are supporting and pushing is the rehabilitation and the revival of the Laguna Lake. Our lake, Laguna Lake, is the third largest freshwater lake in Asia, but it is quote-unquote dying. Marami pong nagre-reclaim, either unauthorized or authorized. We are calling government to control. Second is also the river is also getting silted. It's now only 2 meters in height. So we're calling, we're seeking, and we're definitely helping. We will help in cleaning that lake to make it a really sustainable water source for Metro Manila. Lastly, gusto ko lang pong i-share yung aming project on water reuse. We have embarked in treating further our wastewater. The wastewater that we collect from our customers, we treat it in our sewerage treatment plant in Parañaque, and we do further treatment to make it potable. This is the first water reuse that's potable, direct potable in Asia actually. And we're delivering now 5 MLD to 2 barangays in Parañaque. So ito po yung some of our short, medium-term solutions that we are partnering with MWSS to address these short-term shortages that we are having, which, as Jokot has mentioned, it's a seasonal shortages that we're experiencing every year.
Thank you, Ramon. Well, is there anything to add from the private sector? Or, okay. Just wanted to make sure that I don't disrupt you when you grab the mic. Earlier, Undersecretary CP mentioned some of the initiatives 3 months into the creation of WRMO. And Secretary Loizaga of the DENR also mentioned the EPR, the Extended Producer's Responsibility, to also improve the quality of water by recovering some of the plastics. So we've had some conservation, efficiency efforts, and now also some resource mapping. From the perspective of resources, we saw that in the past week, there was insane amount of flooding. And usually for Filipinos, it's also an obvious question where there are seasons where we have an excess of water. But when you showed us, USEC CP, the budget of the DPWH on flood control, it appears that a lot of them are just on dikes, but nothing to collect all the flooded water. Is there something that you see here as an opportunity when it comes to water resource management and even some savings from flood control that can go into water production or water treatment?
Thanks, Karen. The issue is because there is climate change, what we are to expect in the country would be extremes, drier dry season and wetter wet seasons. And the certified #1 mitigation adaptation strategy for having those extremes would be to store water during the wet season so that we will have water to use during the extended dry season. No, so it's really storage. I'm not talking about the Hoover dams and the Three Gorges Dam in China, no? Our geography is that we're many small islands, and therefore we should scale our water resources the same way. Many of these smaller dams and reservoirs. So that's one of the efforts, and this is really for us to mitigate whatever impacts there will be with climate change.
Thank you, USEC CP. Just a follow-up question. You showed earlier this big discrepancy when it comes to the budget. I think 14 billion on water projects and then about 276 billion on flood control. But the reality is, like, for example, I came from the DPWH as Undersecretary for Legal. So when it comes to allocating the budget, a lot of the decisions also get made at the district level. But with the creation of the WRMO, and this also goes to the point of Jokot, that when it comes to sectors like energy, it's very clear after the EPIRA as to who conducts like the supervision and the decision making. But for the water resources with the WRMO, is this something that can have the capacity to have what Professor Dindo mentioned earlier as a whole of society approach, where decisions on, for example, creating dams in strategic locations, like for example, when you showed us that area in Imus, it can be made despite all the different mandates.
Well, number one, the amounts for infrastructure, these are unheard of in the DNR. I think the whole budget of the DNR is something like 24 billion pesos. And this is all for land management, mineral exploration, watershed protection, etc., etc. 24 billion. No, that's just one project in one province for DPWH. No? And therefore, and also just for comparison, I was asking Ma'am Bobby here, the entire infrastructure for Kaliwa Dam is 18 billion pesos. So with the 276 billion, we could have made 15 Kaliwa dams just this year alone. No? And next year, there'd be another 200 billion for infrastructure. What we're saying is that the approach in terms of protecting our communities against flooding is that it's not just putting walls. No, in fact, if you will ask me as a scientist, when you put dikes in rivers, and this is madaling maintindihan, when you put dikes in the rivers, you eliminate whatever meandering that can happen with the rivers. No? And that meandering part of the rivers actually serve as a function because that slows down the velocity of the river. When you straighten all these rivers, what you are effectively doing is pushing all that water further downstream. And therefore, the flooding actually increases downstream when you put dikes midstream and upstream. And the effect of that is that you will have to put even higher dikes in the downstream portion. So it's a vicious cycle until you find that there are other solutions, maybe nature-based solutions, impoundments, offline storage, small height reservoirs, and effectively, these reservoirs you can now use because we want to keep all that water during the wet season for use during the dry season. So it just makes sense. And in terms of partnering, so far, in the last 3 months, I Viber Ma'am Bobby every day, Director Bill every day, ASEC Eric of NEDA. Sobrang dali. Because the way that Filipinos operate is through friendship, Talagang wala masyadong formalities, And I do the same. I hope it's okay, Mon and Jokot, that I also Viber them. Uy, patulong naman sa ganito. So for the last 3 months was fast-paced, And hopefully it can continue on. So, okay, magsawa.
If I may add, Karen, actually, MWSS is the most happy about the creation of WRMO. Yes. When you talk about the Kaliwa Dam, it should have been delivered 2022, and we don't have any problem even with El Nino. But it took us just for one clearance. It took us 8 years. So it's really MWSS is very much happy with Secretary Tony on the helm and also USEC CP. Kahit alas 12 ng hating gabi, nagte-text kami pareho para to make sure na talagang ipupus talaga yung ating mga clearances and permits so we can really go on with the construction of Kaliwa Dam. Kaliwa Dam is not an ordinary pipelaying project. We are building a dam. Since 1968, we have not built any dam for water supply. And this is the reason why, and at the time, I really don't know the population, but now the population is 20 million for the whole service area of MWSS. And for redundancy, and to address the demand, the growing demand, we really need this Kaliwa Dam and the succeeding phase 2 of Kaliwa Dam. Thank you. Thank you sa
Yes, thank you. If I may just add to what Administrator Bobby and of course USEC CP has said, this is the first time I believe that we have a DPWH secretary that has also reached out to the DNR and to the other water-related agencies to work together with them. So this type of convergence ways of work, no, are really where the secret is, I think, in terms of the acceleration, in terms of what we can achieve, no. So Secretary Bonoan has in fact invited us to be part of the technical advising and management of these different projects and has opened the door for collaboration between the water-related agencies and DPWH. So I wanted to commend really Secretary Bonoan for that. And second, maybe to add just to the question on environmental degradation and the work that we're doing. As part of the new ways of work, and I would add to what Jokot has already said, we are partnering, for example, with WAWA, no, with Prime Infra, to actually preserve parts of the forest, of the watershed. So they have adopted over 1,800 hectares, really, of the watershed to actually maintain it and keep it secure in order, of course, to keep the ecosystem service in terms of water provision, but also to maintain the forest for its own carbon sequestration value. So these are our new convergence ways of work, I think, that are very critical to deriving multiple solutions from single decisions that are being made at different levels. I don't think they like my statement, but anyway, so that I just wanted to share that. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. At least this is really informative for us Filipinos to understand what can we expect in the pipeline and what's going on in terms of how the government and the private sector are working together to manage the water crisis. I think Attorney Kid, sorry, Mr. Jose,
Yeah, Rojas.
Mr. Rojas, sorry.
I know, good afternoon, everyone. I know that we are in the center of Metro Manila, in Quezon City. At pagpaumanhin niyo po, lahat ng pinag-usapan kanina, puro Metro Manila. But looking at the slides of the Undersecretary, can I please take everyone outside of Manila, please, if that's okay? And I would like to put the case of Cebu City or Metro Cebu as an example. As we speak, sir, yung slide mo po, yung may mga ilaw after 10 years yun, no? But as we speak, the Metro Cebu area demand is 570 million liters per day. And you know how much the water utility can only supply? 270 million liters per day. So as we speak, there is a shortage of 300 million liters per day. Unlike Metro Manila, where we have the Angat Dam, Cebu only has the Buhisan Dam, which was constructed. I know everyone will not believe that the Buhisan Dam was constructed in 1911. And ever since, the Buhisan Dam has not been improved. So, I mean, as progressive as Cebu City is, everywhere, although it is now prohibited to dig deep wells, but even how dig you deep of a deep well, the aquifer is contaminated with salt water. So kahit anong butas, maalat pa rin ang lumalabas. So we in the private sector, because of the need of Cebu, have no choice but to go into desalination. You know? So it's expensive, but the next water source in Cebu is in the island of Bohol. And however abundant the water in Bohol is, the Boholanos and the Cebuanos do not see eye to eye, and the Boholanos do not want to share their water to Cebu City. The next probably logical source for water in Cebu City is all the way from Atlas Mining in Toledo. But the nightmare of acquiring the right of way to bring the water to Cebu. So you can imagine, Yusek, if we look at your slide, 10 years from now, where will Cebu get water? So we in the private sector, together with the Boitis and other private companies, are working on desalination projects, hopefully, to solve the water crisis of Cebu. Sayang kasi, Cebu, you have tourism, you have everything there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Juan Rojas, as the president of Philinvest Development Corporation Utilities, now that you mentioned also like the water shortage in Cebu, can you share with us some of the medium to long-term development plans of FDCUI in those areas?
Yeah, as I mentioned, we have existing desalination projects already in Cebu that have been there for the last 5 years. But these are just small-scale projects. But now that there is already proof of concept, our plan really is to build 80 million liters per day of a desalination facility in Cebu to really help solve the water crisis in Cebu. So that's our first. That's going to be actually long-term because the contract is 25 years. So hopefully we will get that off the ground because the most expensive water is no water at all, just like power. Anyway, it's going to be blended with the existing supply of the water district, so it's not going to come out that expensive. But really, it's really important to solve this. And looking at that, my colleague here is also in Davao, no? But at least they are already almost there.
Thank you.
Thank you for the nice segue.
Yes, Anne, yes.
Yeah. So maybe just to add to what everybody has said, and just on what Secretary said earlier, she really hit the nail on the head when she said the main problem we had was the industry is so fragmented. How fragmented? Over 30 regulators, over 22,000 water service providers in the country. And there needs to be a way to be able to rationally regulate and manage all the water resources. It's fragmented also in the sense that water has become very territorial and political. Our water in our city cannot go to the other city. But in reality, watersheds and aquifers, they know no municipal or provincial boundaries. So in that sense, management of these resources should not be at the local level, and which is why the creation of the WRMO is such a very welcome development. Touching a bit more on governance, what USEC CP mentioned earlier about flood prevention, stormwater drains, reminded me of what another country is doing. I think in New Zealand, they have the 3 waters reform where they tackle not only water, but wastewater and stormwater as well. And I think that's something that, well, USEC CP is already looking into how to be able to harness stormwater and wastewater as well. You also mentioned the USEC CP about diversification of water sources. So right now, 80% of our piped water is coming from groundwater, simply because groundwater is cheap. Dig a hole in the ground, pump it out, you have water. Surface water, on the other hand, although over 80% of our potential water sources are from surface water, it's a bit more expensive, requires a bit more investment. You need scale, so it's better to cluster the demand of each area to be able to serve them effectively. So there's, and that's where the private sector can come in to help with these types of investments. And for example, what we're doing in Davao City, Yusek David mentioned earlier about multiple uses of the same water. So that same water, you can use it to generate hydropower, then use it to treat water. And then perhaps the wastewater effluent, you can also use it for irrigation. So no longer is it like a matter of a question between, do we prioritize irrigation, or do we prioritize power, or do we prioritize municipal water? Now, looping all the three things together is no longer impossible because we have the technology to be able to do that. What is lacking, and I think with the advent of the WRMO, is that coordination amongst the different agencies and bringing all the stakeholders together so everybody's on the same page. So, and we look forward to the work that will be done by WRMO.
Thank you, Attorney Ann. So what you were describing, the three different uses of water, for example, it's not necessarily undertaken by one entity, but with the WRMO, at least those three potential uses of water can be coordinated among different entities so that it can be seamless, or at least the requirements can be faster, not 8 years like admin Leonor was describing earlier. Attorney Kit.
Mukhang ako na lang. Hindi pa nagsasalita.
You already know
so
that you're up
obliged
next.
to.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you want to add something first on the issues that we're discussing?
If you don't mind.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, it's, first of all, I'd like to thank Ma'am Bobby. Yeah. Nung incumbent congressman ako, MWSS helped in facilitating, you know, the problem of yung mga daanan ng tubo that brings the MWSS pipes. And it's always a conflict between the construction ng DPWH and the housing and the urban settlements. Ma'am Bobby, I remember MWSS, nung incumbent ako, tinulungan yung ma-facilitate yung housing project at ma-clear din yung daan ng tubo by granting a right-of-way. And as I understand it, sabi niya kanina, ayos yan, nag-expand pa sila. Humingi uli yung community and the local government and tinulungan nila. I think that's the insight na I wanna add. It's yung sinasabi ni Professor Manit kanina, na it's not just the government and the private sector, but it has to be a whole community approach. So down to the local governments and down to the individual communities involved. That said, Ma'am, medyo kabado ho talaga ako sa mega project kasi mega utang din ng mega project. I'd like to put that out there lang. Okay. But I do remember nung kami ni Administrator Ronnie ay congressman pa. I think during my first term, namomroblema kami dito sa Metro Manila about flooding all the time. Flooding all the time. But there was a project stewarded also by then Professor David, before he was USEC, na nasasabi nila beforehand sa amin kung kailan darating yung floodwaters. Advanced. As in, we had more than 24, even 48 hours, even a week to prepare before the floodwaters arrive sa district namin, sa communities namin. And that was so efficient na before that time, kunyan, nagugulat na lang kami, nagsuswimming na yung mga tao. Oh. So, what am I saying? I think the innovations they're pointing out, the scientific approaches, the innovations are as important. So that we don't, like, the Israeli ambassador is here. Wala naman silang dam dun, desyerto nga eh. Diba? You're talking about Cebu, na it's the desalination plant, the desalination. They're talking about the rivers na may irrigation dati na patay na. Oh, palagay ko papatulan ni Mayor AA yan. Oh, I'm sure na papatulan ni Mayor AA yan. So, there are many innovative approaches that involve the communities, everybody, but driven by science and technology and innovation, na solutions on the ground, real time. Now we don't have to depend on mega projects and mega loans or other things, but actual real situations. But that said, madami pa rin tayong kailangan ayusin. Kasi yung sinasabi ni Yusek CP na retarding fund, first term ko rin namin ni Kong Ronnie, may retarding fund kami with DPWH doon sa San Francisco River Stream na project ng DPWH. Hirap na hirap yung mga tao kasi to do it, kailangan mo mag-relocate. Like we were talking about the Luzon Avenue, Daan Tubo na kanto, kailangan mo mag-relocate, kailangan mo ayusin yung housing. Our project with NLEX before na naayos sana lahat yun, you can't because hindi directly involved yung interests ng community at yung mga mamamayan. So still, mag-retarding fund nga. We presume na magagawa yung retarding fund ngayon. We presume na may technology so that the water stored there can be recycled or reused as potable water. Parang sa Israel, sa Germany, tap water lang na iinom mo na. And yet, upstream, yung diaper ng bata, tinatapon pa rin. Yung mga dike na binubuo mo, puno pa rin ng plastics. So it has to be one. It's a welcome development na one administrator, isang timon, katulad ng sinabi ninyo. Pero it has to be everybody involved. Otherwise, katulad nung sinabi nyo rin na after the meter yung spoilage, hindi na kasalanan nila Hindi na nila kasalanan. Yun yung mga plastic na PVC na pag pumasok ka sa community, nakikita mo dumigrip mo kumaliwat kanan everywhere. Pustahan tayo pag kinumpute nyo lahat yun. Mas malaki pa yun kesa sa top 4 na wastage dito sa area. Yun, I guess.
Thank you, Attorney Kit. Admin Leonor.
I feel so old when everybody's calling me Ma'am Bobby. But I just want to join the statement of Congressman Belmonte. Actually, for the information of everybody, MWSS, including the water districts, we are considered government-owned and controlled corporation. And we don't get any subsidy from the government. It's us who pays for the CAPEX, operation and maintenance. And that is the role of our regulatory office, making sure that the expenses incurred by our concessionaires are prudently and efficiently incurred so that the water tariff will not really be abused. Okay. But, sir, ang sinasabi po nung kalaban natin sa Kaliwa Dam, water is owned by the state. Iyan ay bigay ng Diyos. What we are praying is the service. That when you open your tap, you have the potable water. You also have the services on sewerage and sanitation. Ang ating pong dalawang concessionaires, wala pong sinisingil sa raw water, but the services, conveyance, treatment, and distribution, and making sure that we have a tight reticulation system. So, iyon po. And we cannot avoid, as I've said, not to go into that mega project sa sinabi ni Congressman because the population is growing, the demand is very high. So when you talk about efficiency, prudency, and efficiency of the project, it's better to build a bigger one than small water sources for us to be able to really save and making sure. Sa kaalaman nyo po, yung ating ginagastos na CAPEX, OPEX, these are spread throughout the life of the concession period. Hindi po bigla yung pagpasok ng taripa sa atin. So, hanggang kailan yung concession period, yun po ay dinidivide up to the time that we have recovered the expenses that are considered prudently and efficiently incurred. Again, doon sa sinabi ni Congressman, MWSS is willing to have memorandum of agreements with the different local government units wherein our right-of-way can also help our local government units, especially on the informal settlers, sir. Thank you po.
Thank you. We also have on Zoom Dr. Philomer Torillo. Dr. Torillo, are you there? There, okay. Thank you. So you have an extensive experience in various organizations and sectors. What do you think is the role of public and private partnership when it comes to overcoming the challenges related to addressing water resource management in the Philippines?
Thank you. Well, first of all, difficult for me to be online when everybody's there in the forum. So please bear with me as I try to explain or answer the questions posted by Karen. So the Philippine Water Supply and Sanitation Master Plan developed by NEDA states that the country would need to spend about 1.1 trillion pesos from 2019 to 2030 to be able to meet its commitments under SDG number 6, which basically is universal access to safe, adequate, and affordable water supply and sanitation. Currently, 87% of the Filipinos have access to safe water supply and about 78% to improve sanitation. As was mentioned, there are almost 25,000 water service providers in the country comprised of water districts, LGU-run water utilities, community-based operators, and private water firms. Now, given the government's limited fiscal space, particularly in the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, there would be a need to tap the private sector to help build and finance the country's infrastructure system, particularly to the provision of water and sanitation services. However, it should be noted that the Philippines is competing with other developing countries for funding, as the global spending requirement for infrastructure development is projected to range from $1 trillion to $1.5 trillion annually, of which the private sector has traditionally accounted for 22%. And to generate interest from private firms, both local and international, there's a need to ensure that the projects are well planned and designed with a fair allocation of risks, competitively tendered, and they allow for a fair return on invested capital. Several successfully tendered PPP water projects in the past include the MWSS privatization, of which we have representatives from MWSS and the two concessionaires, the Angat hydroelectric power plant privatization, as well as the Bulacan bulk water supply project. However, currently private sector participation in the water sector has been undertaken using joint venture agreements by more than 50 water districts, and Commission on Audit reports show that some of these joint ventures did not have the required feasibility studies, failed to identify the necessary deliverables, did not comply with provisions of the agreement, did not include any revenue sharing for the water districts, and other similar negative observations. Hopefully, the new NEDA guidelines on joint venture agreements have already addressed these issues. I submit that the water resource is the most difficult of all the resources to manage and govern. It has so many competing uses. I think this was already mentioned. It's used for domestic water use, irrigation, power generation. It's needed for environmental health. There are cultural and religious and entertainment uses. It is a source of food, among many other uses. Likewise, there are many issues related to its use. Efficiency, which has been discussed in the case of MWSS privatization, but there are also other issues like equity, social justice, human rights, poverty, public health issues, gender issues, even political ecology and the like. As the role of government changes in any privatization, PPP, or joint venture arrangement, it becomes a from being a service provider, it now has to be a regulator. It therefore must be cognizant of these many competing uses as well as the many issues related to its use. Only then can the Philippine government ensure that it is able to meet its goal of providing universal access to safe, adequate, and affordable water supply and sanitation to all.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Torrio. Okay, there. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Torrio, for that insightful answer. And right now, because we want to give our participants, also our audience, an opportunity to ask questions, we'll make the asking of questions for this round very fast. So for everyone, for all our panel members, I'm going to ask you, and you will answer very short, and maybe in a few words, just a question on what do you think, so you just name one. So we'll both be hearing from government and private sector here, and from also an administrator, which is like a half-baked GOCC that has to administer their own revenue as well. What do you think is the key challenge to implementing a comprehensive and effective implementation of water resource management in the Philippines? So it sounds like issue yung kalat-kalat before, but just name one. And also, if you have a suggestion, like what do you think needs to be, it's a way to address that challenge. But if there's no answer to that, then I think this is a good opportunity to also raise it in this forum. But just name for you, for example, USEC, CP, we'll start with you. But just name one do you think is a key implementation challenge?
Hirap naman nun, Karen. Parang parang explain the meaning of life in one word.
It's true.
Number one, that everyone should know that water is owned by the state. Not a single entity owns it. And therefore, for example, Mr. Rojas, I think the solution to Cebu water is Bohol. You should be nicer to your neighbor, no? But because they have the water, but I think we should work on that. Sorry, maba, but
Yeah, no,
yes.
that's interesting because that goes perhaps into a policy solution, right? Like the treatment of water as owned by the state, or maybe the government can really step in and say how it should be used. Admin Leonor.
Department of Water and true to the word ease of doing business.
Yeah, that's very important.
If the NEDA, that master plan, is a very good plan. If you read it, you will see exactly where we are. But I think what it lacks, it tells us the problem. It doesn't tell us the solution. So we have to really sit down and figure out how do we execute on those concretely. And it's not just Metro Manila, it's the entire country. So I think WRMO and the other agencies will have a job to do.
Thank you.
Concrete plans to execution.
I would say valuing water properly.
Monetary value.
Yeah, valuing it properly, because people think water is free, but to Admin Bobby's point, it's not. There's so much that goes into treating water, and we've been spoiled because back in the day we can dig a well and water comes out. Now that's not the case so much anymore. So valuing water properly. Would you rather pay 2 pesos per cubic but you don't have 24/7 water? Or would you pay the right amount to be able to have water 24/7?
Mr. Rojas.
Admin Bobby, ano nga yung sinabi niyo, ma'am? Ease of doing business. Pwede kong sundan, one-stop shop. Kasi ang permit, inaabot ng taon at maraming taon. Just like people would say, it takes 5 years to build the power plant. Pero sa tubig, hindi rin nagkakalayo. Matagal din magtayo ng water treatment facility. So ma'am, if I may, ease of doing business, one-stop shop, kung pwede bilisan ang mga permits.
Ako, isang conductor where everybody is coordinated and everybody gets to participate. Pero kailangan isang conductor at saka isang direction. So ang ibig sabihin nun, ma'am, magpupuyat uli si CP hanggang...
Thank you. I have a follow-up question on that. And in the meantime, we just wanted to announce that we'll take questions from the audience. But in order for us to facilitate the questions, we have people going around. So you can write on your notepads in front of you your questions, and then you can submit that question so that we can read it. As a follow-up question, since Attorney Kit mentioned one conductor, and we have the WRMO now, but for the information of us Filipinos, this is an executive order. So the president can only organize what's under the executive department, but cannot grant really additional powers in the way that Congress can. So for us Filipinos, to also manage our expectations, would the WRMO have that authority to also make decisions that would allow, for example, having just a one-stop shop, being able to have LGOs, give concessions if they're the solution, if the water in their territory is the solution to a neighboring province's problem. Even the questions on what projects to undertake when it comes to national funds. It's really this, having this whole of government approach apart from having a whole of society approach. Secretary, I think Secretary has the answer.
So basically the question is, will the WRMO have enough teeth to its function? I think the concept of the WRMO is very much a work in progress. The president has in his mind, and if I may be so bold as to say, that water resources need to have an integrated water resources management approach that is nationwide, but is locally relevant. We cannot disassociate how we implement at the local level from the national strategy overall. Secondly, we do understand that infrastructure projects need to be regional in focus, but may of course be specific in terms of the delivery areas. And so that actually falls within, at this point, of course, the DPWH. No? What is important, I think, to recognize is that for the first time, we have the ability to converge the policy directions in a strategic way between those key departments in the executive, which are the Department of Public Works, Department of Interior and Local Governments, because they too deliver water projects at the local level, the DENR, and of course, departments like the DA. So as to whether we have enough teeth, I think the President has realized the value of organizing this office. It's now up to us to begin to listen to the stakeholders and put forward in a recommendatory way, okay, how we might be able to exercise the new authorities that have been given to the office. It is a new body, and we are actually quite optimistic in terms of the way that it can bring together water resource management in the country. So the directive is really to work with all stakeholders, principally, of course, the private sector here, and we hope to be able to make some key announcement very soon on our collaborations with the private sector. So thank you.
Can I react?
Yes, of course, Mon.
We are very happy na may kakampi na ho kami with the creation of the office. Meron lang ako isang specific example. In our way of doing business today, secondary hong citizen lang ang tubig. Example, pag meron hong lay na pipes na dadaanan ng rail or ng road project, pinapatabi ho kami kaagad. At we are really treated that way. Priority to road, priority tong rail. Tabi kayo. That's how we are treated today. So we are happy that meron na ho kaming kakampi sa kabinete.
Thank you, Mon, for that insight. We have also a few words from the Ambassador of Israel, His Excellency Ilan Flas. May we hear from you, sir?
Thank you very much. I just wanted to say a few words. And first of all, thank you very much to the Secretary for inviting me to this forum. And I have to say that it's a pleasure to hear this discussion. I mean, you're all experts in water, and it's amazing to hear they are talking basically the same language in a way and the same intention. And getting the different stakeholders together, that's the only way to move forward. Myself, I'm here because I believe that Israel is one of those international examples of a country which is doing water management on a national level, having also legislation, and having one regulator, which took over all the responsibilities from the different agencies, all put together in one. Very difficult to do, politically, whatever we want to say, very complicated. But at the end of the day, we can see that water management in Israel is centralized, sort of looking at the water as a national asset, as a service that the government has to give, but the citizen has to pay for, or the farmer has to pay for, or whoever it is who is using the water. And secondly, looking at the water as a national asset, you maximize the usage of water and you minimize losing water. So every drop of water is reused. And you look at sewage as a water resource. You look at the sea as the water resource. So any available water, we look at it as a resource. And basically, I would say that we look at it from a few levels. From one side, regulation. The other side is management and best practices. And then, of course, the technologies. And then implemented by the companies, if it is local government or if it is private companies, depend on what part of the sector. So I believe, and our intention, as we were discussing also with the president and also soon with the secretary, is really sharing the Israeli model. I would never come to the Philippines and say what to do, because this is not my role. But my role as Israeli ambassador is really to share the Israeli experience and to see in what way we can contribute to the efforts here in the Philippines. And I have to say, knowing, and this is a new thing, sort of the WRMO, I think it's a fantastic sort of way forward, and it's still a new thing which is now being sort of, you're learning the way, so we'll be really very happy to share what we have done. And I do want also to add that we are happy, I'm happy to say that I'm engaging already today with some of you, some of the water actors here in the room, and we are seeing Israeli technologies implemented in different aspects, including in water desalination in Cebu and other practices here in Manila. So I'm really very happy, and I would like to see sort of as much as possible us here contributing really to a country that is so rich in water. And for me as an Israeli and being here, I see so much water, and it sort of just doesn't make sense how come there's a shortage of water. But of course we all understand the problem, and just, one very small thing, sort of, when I walk in the streets and I see sort of people, the way you wash the cars, you wash the streets, you wash the pavement, everything is washed, and we just don't do it in Israel. So if you do it, you pay so much money to do it. So it's also and that's something that I was missing. It's also, it's a national effort, which means it's also education. There's a lot of space for civil society. So there are many other sort of complementing aspects to looking into the water as a national asset and a national challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Ilan. That was highly informative. And I think you were able to foresee the next question from our audience, because someone asked exactly what you pointed to about civil society. So this question is addressed to USEC CP, but I think this can also be answered by Attorney Kit. In the WRMO and to its future programs and projects, what would be the concrete role of civil society in achieving the success of these projects and programs?
Hirap naman eh. Pwede ka bang mauna, Kongkit?
Kaya mo yan, Brad.
No, definitely we will have to, no, in all the projects that we will embark on, it will have to have the communities being part of it. Now, sometimes we do projects that we think, as experts, will be the best solution for the communities, except that we're looking at the problem from the outside. And therefore, I think it's just an extra step. It shouldn't be too hard to add that second step of consulting the communities, what they think should be the proper solution, and put that in the decision-making process. I think that's the only thing we can do at this point.
Thank you, USEC CP. What about Attorney Kit? Anything to add? Sorry, yes.
No, I want to say, we had a meeting in civil society, we had a meeting with the secretary about a month ago, and obviously it's not just supply that we have to manage, it's demand. So I think it's the education of conservation to the point of the ambassador, the good ambassador. And the call was to make sure that people are educated about water conservation. And I think, to the point of Anna, that we have to appreciate the value, right? It goes hand in hand. So I think that's a solid call to try to educate civil society. Whenever there are issues on power, there's a lot on the news about power and how we should try to reduce power. So it's demand side management, move to renewable energy, etc. If fuel prices go up, then there's immediate call to arms about how to reduce fuel consumption. We hardly see anything or hear anything about solid, stable water because, it doesn't hurt the consumers as much, I think. And to the point, it doesn't cost much to actually drill a hole in the ground and extract water, right? Obviously, the water needs to be treated. So I think that's one concrete step, and I think you'd be amazed at what people can do if you get civil society to collaborate and really just do it. That's just on the demand side. Supply side is a different ball of wax altogether, but this is something that society can do.
Something, sorry. May naisip ako. Tama yung sinasabi ni Jokot eh. We are only able to value something when it is no longer there. No? And in the case of Israel, they didn't have a lot of water. And that's why the value of water to them is top of mind to everybody. We have so much water. No? And maybe if I ask everyone in the audience here or anyone, how much is your water bill, you probably don't know because it's insignificant compared to your power, no? Internet, telco, di ba? No? So in our case, I always tell this story. Last month, my wife was complaining. She was so mad. Sabi niya, CP, our bill is so high. And she was getting really mad. And I said, how much is our water bill this month? This is not, we don't reach this much. And she said, it's 700 pesos. I go, wow, okay. So don't get mad anymore. I'll pay for our bill this month. And then I asked, how much is our bill usually? Usually it's only 630, 640. So the entire thing is we're fighting for 50 pesos here. And you know where that's coming from? It's coming from 2019, when everyone in Metro Manila didn't have water. The drum in our bathroom is still in our bathroom. 4 years since 2019 when we had that water crisis. Just a reminder how important water is. So I think that got to her, and therefore that 60 pesos was super valuable. No? And everyone should have that mindset, I guess.
I just would like to add a couple of anecdotes. I remember village association, one of our village associations, na bulk meter pa sila. For the longest time, and we still have, inside Quezon City, inside Metro Manila, may mga bulk meter, may mga deep well pa, until now. And one of the utilities, I think kayo po, needed to run a pipe through the village to get to a waste treatment plant. Yeah. And just to get the whole village to agree to reattach everything and shift from bulk meters to letting that pipe pass, it took everybody involved, the village associations down to door nakatok to convince everybody. But in the end, everybody came off better for it. There was a waste treatment plant. They ran through a pipe through the waste treatment plant. The local government got to, the village association got to turn over the streets to the local government para mapagawa. And everybody's water went down in the long run. So it's a matter of perspective. And another example, I do remember, I have a boundary, intercity, Valenzuela, Quezon City, and Caloocan. And all the barangays clustered around there, they work together with NLEX and they clean all the esteros every even before the flooding, and it's been very, very effective. So it's not just about the water you drink or the water that they serve us, that comes out through our mga gripo natin or the meters. It's also about the wastage, the waste treatment, and it's also about the flooding and the water. It's so weird. Tama ho si Ambassador. It's so weird. Dami nating pera, nalulunod tayo sa tubig dahil sa rain dance ninyo. Oh, dahil sa rain dance ninyo. And yet, just the week before, we were complaining na paubos na yung tubig natin. Yeah.
So this is unfortunate. We ran out of time. We're running out of time. So do we have time for one more question, or is there? Yes.
Yeah, just very quickly, I think this is very important. Sir Mon mentioned that they have this water reuse and new water, right? Our technology partner has been doing this in Singapore for more than 20 years already. Ano bang ibig sabihin nito? It's the ability to reuse the water. Kung iisipin natin, Sir Mon, kadiri, ano? Because it's from the sewerage. But in Singapore, water that is cleaned from the sewerage is used for drinking, number one. But maybe in the Philippines, maybe we can start in between muna and make it gray water, no? We have a pilot project in Alabang, in Philinvest City in Alabang, where we would pipe our buildings with two general pipes laid. One is the clean water, the other one is gray water for the flushing, for irrigation, for cleaning of the cars, etc. And this, by the people accepting it, this would really help. This will really help a lot in water conservation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rojas. We really look forward to that pilot project. I hope you can share later on like how well it's doing. So we'll give the final word to USEC CP for this. It's been 3 months since the WRMO has been created, but as Filipinos here, what can we look forward to? Any plans and programs from the DENR? What can we expect also from this water crisis?
First and foremost, although we've had this much rain in the last 5 days, no, the total amount of increase in water level in Angat will be good for 5 days of usage of Metro Manila, 5 to 7 days. No? So theoretically we need 1 month, 2 months of that much rain, falling. And therefore, what I'm trying to say is that we're not out of the crisis yet. No, wala pa namang crisis, but the water level is still quite precarious. No, it's still manageable, but we need to. It's at 180 meters. No, it increased by 2 meters over the last 5 days. We need it to be up to around 208. No, so that far. No, we have around 5 months. No, to be able to do so that we will have enough water the following year. And therefore, water conservation still needs to be done. No, we are doing that, plugging the leaks, and the concerted effort of the general public and government need to be in place. No, because the supply is finite, the usage we can probably control a little bit. Moving forward in the next few months, you've seen some of the projects that we would be proposing to DPWH, hopefully in coordination with Manila Water and Maynilad, because these are within some of their concession areas. We hope to work with the other private sector partners, Aboitiz, and I think the key so far in the last 3 months is that we recognize that expertise actually is present, not just in DNR, but in other agencies, other development organizations. World Bank is here as well, no, and everyone's here. And Sectoni and I, we feel that the concerted effort, no, maybe because friends lang namin yung mga nandun sa agencies na yun, whatever it takes to make it work, if it's just at the friendship level, okay na rin. And I think if we are able to manage to not have any water crisis this year, next year I think we're on the road, on the way towards water security, not only in Metro Manila, but hopefully we start solving some of the other problems in other provinces, including Cebu. Yan. Maraming
Thank you
salamat
so
po.
much. And that concludes our panel discussion. So let's give a warm round of applause for all our panel speakers. Thank you so much, everyone.
May we request our panelists to please stay on stage first for a photo opportunity, right? And Sec also, and Professor Dindo Manhit. And may we also call on PBES to join on stage, please. Ambassador, would you like to join the photo opportunity as well, please? All right, thank you very much again to our speakers for a very insightful and informative discussion this afternoon. All right, now to officially close the event, may we call on PBES Secretary General, Engineer Felix Jose Vitangcol, to deliver the closing remarks.
Thank you again, Joyce, for that introduction. Madam DENR Secretary Maria Antonia Yulo Loizaga, Undersecretary CP David, and our esteemed panelists today. Good afternoon, and thank you for sharing your insights on water security earlier. And to our diverse audience, both in the room and online, good afternoon, and thank you for being with us today. Now, I stand before you with a renewed sense of urgency and determination. Over the past few hours, we have discussed the pressing water security challenges facing the Philippines and the critical role that every sector of society play in solving them. We have witnessed the power of collaboration, the power of knowledge sharing, and the power of innovation in finding sustainable solutions to ensure water security for our future. We cannot afford to be complacent, and actually, inaction is not an option. Climate change and global warming have intensified the occurrence of floods and droughts, placing immense pressure on our water resources as well as infrastructure that are designed with future environments much the same as decades ago. The El Niño, for example, looms on the horizon, reminding us that the urgent need to take action. However, climate change and global warming are just parts of the bigger puzzle that we need to address. Because of the mega trends such as the increasing or the continuous growth of our population, the emerging urban areas, which influence the way we demand and consume resources, the pressure to ensure an accessible, clean, reliable, and affordable water will increase over the coming years. For a developing economy with increasing industrial activities, a fundamental development of new and enhancement of existing infrastructures, policy directions, and systems are required if you are to prevent a future where water scarcity and insecurity become the norms. Access to reliable and affordable water impacts the every lives of Filipinos and the economy as a whole, and I will not delve deeply into this anymore, as our speakers and panelists earlier have shared their insights. But just to share an example, challenge in water reduces yields and lower productivity, leading to food shortages and higher prices of commodities. This in turn will lead to higher inflation and greater poverty, particularly in rural areas. Likewise, lack of clean and access to clean water and sanitation, especially in the urban areas, will lead to increased disease, particularly among the poor and marginalized population. But within these challenges lies opportunities. The opportunity to innovate, the opportunity to collaborate, and the opportunity to act on a renewed sense of urgency. I commend the national government and the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, for the move to establish a more centralized and coordinated approach to water management through the Water Resource Management Office, because the lack of which leads to inadequate collection and sharing of water-related data, making it difficult to make data-driven and informed decisions on water allocation, planning, and monitoring. Moreover, the lack of centralized and coordinated approach creates bottlenecks in developing evidence-based policies and programs that address the country's water security challenges effectively. Now, throughout the forum today, we have explored the critical role of the private sector in addressing these challenges and the significant contributions they have already made. They have showcased their capabilities to drive innovation, mobilize investments, and implement sustainable practices on the ground. We have heard inspiring case studies on successful initiatives that have improved infrastructures, reduced water losses, and enhanced water quality. The private sector has proven, and I hope they continue to, that they are not just for-profit driven entities, but as agents of change committed to the betterment of society and the environment. Now, we must build on the momentum that we have generated during discussion and translate our discussions into tangible actions. We must leverage on each other's strengths and expertise and to forge a stronger partnership and collaboration to develop comprehensive, integrated, and sustainable water management solutions. Now, in closing, I want to express my deepest appreciation to our esteemed guests, our speakers, our panelists, and our participants for making the forum a resounding success. Now, your expertise, your insights, and your unwavering dedication have been the driving force behind behind our shared visions. Let us not simply view this event as a moment in time, but as a catalyst of change, a call to action that resonates far beyond these walls. Again, good afternoon and thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Engineer Felix Vitangcol. And again, thank you very much to our speakers, guests, and everyone who's here with us today in the venue, and also to everyone who's watching via Zoom and Facebook Live. Thank you for joining us again, and we hope that you join us in our next event, which is actually next week, Friday, July 28th. In that event, we will have experts assess the State of the Nation address of President Marcos Jr. And also, we will be releasing the results of the latest Pulse Asia survey on corruption. So if you're interested in that, we hope to see you again next week. And once again, this has been Joyce Ilas. Thank you very much. And we prepared snacks for you outside. So enjoy and have a pleasant rest of the day. Thank you very much.